Hello, in today's class, let us take up a fresh chapter from chemistry, atoms and molecules. We know that anything which occupies a space and has mass is known as matter, and these matter are made up of extremely tiny particles called atoms and molecules. It was believed that atoms are the smallest particles that make up matter and are indivisible. अनि यो कुरामा एटम्सहरु indivisible हुन्छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ कहिले सुरु भयो भन्दा चाहिँ it all started in 6th century. Okay, around 500 BC there was an Indian philosopher. Okay, his name was Maharshi Kanad, an Indian philosopher. Maharishi Kanad. Okay, Maharshi Kanad. He was a Sanskrit teacher, and he said that every padarth, okay, every padarth. Padarth means matter in Sanskrit. Since he was a Sanskrit teacher, so उहाँले matter लाई के भन्नुहुन्थ्यो? Padarth. Okay, so every padarth or matter is made up of tiny particles. एकदमै मसिनो particles ले बनिएको हुन्छ every padarth, and which are indivisible. So these particles cannot be divided further. Okay, indivisible, and he called these particles as Parmanu and named the particles as Parmanu. Okay, so उहाँले के भन्नुभयो, म्याटर चाहिँ सानो सानो पार्टिकल्सले बनिएको हुन्छ अनि त्यो पार्टिकल्सलाई चाहिँ भन्नुभयो परमाणु. Okay, and around that same time, okay, there were two Greek philosophers around that same time, around the same era. There were two Greek philosophers. There were two Greek philosophers. There were Democritus and Leucippus. Okay, Democritus and Leucippus. Okay, Democritus and Leucippus. Now, Democritus was a student of Leucippus. Democritus and Leucippus को student हुनुहुन्थ्यो, उहाँ चाहिँ गुरु हुनुहुन्थ्यो. Okay, now what they suggested was, they suggested that if we go on dividing matter, there comes a stage when the particles cannot be divided further. So के भन्नुभयो, हामीले म्याटरलाई डिभाइड गर्दै जाँदा चाहिँ फर्स्टमा डिभाइड गर्यो अलिक सानो पार्टिकल्स, अझै डिभाइड गर्यो सानो पार्टिकल गर्दै एउटा यस्तो पार्टिकल आउँछ, त्यो पार्टिकललाई चाहिँ we cannot divide it further, and he named that particles atoms. Okay, Democritus named the particles atoms. Okay, he gave the name atoms to those particles. Same कुरा भन्नु भएको, जो चाहिँ महर्षि कनडले भन्नु भएको थियो, सेम त्यही कुरा चाहिँ यहाँ दुईजनाले पनि भन्नु हुँदैछ. एटम चाहिँ म्याटर चाहिँ टाइनी पार्टिकल्सले बनिएको हुन्छ. नाम मात्रै भिन्दै. उहाँले संस्कृतमा परमाणु दिनुभयो, उनीहरूले ग्रीकमा चाहिँ नाम के थियो, atoms, because atom is derived from the word atom is derived from Greek word atomus. Okay, यो atom भन्ने शब्द कहाँबाट आएको भन्दा चाहिँ ग्रीक शब्द atomus बाट आएको, which means uncut, meaning uncut or it is also known as indivisible. So जो चाहिँ काट्नु सक्दैन, जो चाहिँ indivisible हुन्छ, त्यस्तोलाई चाहिँ हामी एटमस, त्यस्तोलाई चाहिँ ग्रीकमा एटमस भनिन्छ. सो त्यहाँबाट चाहिँ शब्द निकाल्नु भयो एटम. सो Democritus gave the name atoms to the particles of matter. Okay, now all these were just philosophical considerations and mere speculations, just guess मात्रै गरेको, mere speculations, and there were no experimental work done to validate these ideas. कुनै experimental work छैन, just experience को आधारमा उहाँहरूले चाहिँ यो कुरा भन्नु भएको. Okay, but by the end of the 18th century, science progressed a lot, and then scientists, they came to know the difference between elements and compounds, and they also realized that elements, they combine together to form compounds, and naturally they were interested to know how elements combine and what happens when they combine. Okay, so in this period, there was a scientist, his name was Anton Laurent Lavoisier. He laid the foundation of chemical science by giving the laws. Okay, he gave the laws. There were 2 laws given by him, and that laid the foundation of chemical science. So chemistry ma सुरुवातमा foundation राख्ने मान्छे को रहेछ Anton Laurent Lavoisier. How did he keep that foundation? By giving out important laws of chemical combination. Okay, so before we move on to the laws of chemical combination, first let us understand what is chemical combination. Okay, law पढ्नु भन्दा अगाडि पहिला chemical combination भनेको के हो त्यो बुझौँ न, हैन? यो chemical combination, we have already studied about chemical combination in our earlier classes. Earlier means तपाईहरु junior मा हुँदाखेरि 6, 7, 8 मा हुँदाखेरि तपाईहरुले पढेको छ. Just the word combination चाहिँ use गर्थेन. त्यतिबेला चाहिँ we used to use the word chemical change or chemical reaction. Okay, हामीले त्यसलाई चाहिँ chemical change अथवा chemical reaction भनेर चाहिँ पढेको थियौं. अब do you remember anything about chemical reaction or chemical change? In a chemical reaction, 2 or more substances combine or they react, and then new substances are formed. Okay, let us take up an example. What do you think happens when you mix an acid with a base? Acid or base लाई mix गर्यो भने के हुन्छ? Acid plus base will give salt plus water. This reaction is known as neutralization reaction. This is neutralization reaction. यो हामीले class 7 मा पनि पढेको छ, neutralization reaction. Now here in this reaction you can see 2 reactants are reacting together and 2 new products are being formed. यो त नयाँ चीज हो नि त, एकदमै नयाँ चीज बन्यो. So this is known as chemical reaction, or this is also known as chemical combination. Okay, so such reactions are called chemical combination. Chemical combination where 1 or more new substances are formed. So नयाँ चीज बन्यो भनी चाहिँ त्यस्तो खालके reaction लाई चाहिँ we call it chemical reaction or chemical combination. Okay, अब बुझ्नु भयो होला chemical combination भनेको के हो. अब let us move on to the laws of chemical combination. Okay, मैले अघि भनिहालेँ को साइन्टिस्टले दिनु भएको अरे laws of chemical combination. It was given by Anton Laurent Lavoisier. Laurent Lavoisier. Okay, alright, so Anton Laurent Lavoisier was very good at finding the masses of substances. Okay, he used to find the masses of substances accurately irrespective of their state. भन्नुको मतलब चाहिँ he could find the masses of even gases perfectly, एकदम perfect, accurate, mistake नगरिकन उहाँले कुनै पनि substance को चाहे त्यो ग्यास होस्, solid होस्, liquid होस्, जे फर्ममा पनि होस् उहाँले त्यसको मास निकाल्नु चाहिँ जान्नुहुन्थ्यो. So he was very keen to know what happens during a chemical reaction. So to know what happens during a chemical reaction, he performed an experiment. Okay, so experiment ma उहाँले के गर्नुभयो, कसले गरेको एक्सपेरिमेन्ट अरे, Antoine Laurent Lavoisier. Okay, now what did he do? He took a conical flask. Okay, उहाँले एउटा conical flask लिनुभयो. So conical flask is like this, looks like this. Okay, so conical flask लिनुभयो. त्यहाँदेखि यो conical flask मा he put some copper sulfate solution. Okay, copper sulfate solution. Copper sulfate लाई पानीमा dissolve गरेर he prepared copper sulfate solution and he put the copper sulfate solution in this bottle. Okay, किन मैले blue ले बनाए भन्दा चाहिँ copper sulfate solution is blue in color. Okay, so यसरी के लिनु भएछ, this is a conical flask. Okay, conical flask, and then he took copper sulfate solution in the conical flask. Okay, now I think it's clear. Now in another test tube, okay, a small test tube, he took another solution, that is sodium carbonate solution. So अर्को test tube मा उहाँले अर्को एउटा solution लिनुभयो, त्यो चाहिँ थियो sodium carbonate solution को. अब के गर्नुभयो भन्दा चाहिँ यो test tube लाई चाहिँ he placed it inside this conical flask in such a way that the contents of the test tube and the flask did not mix with one another. Okay, just झुन्डाउनु मात्रै भयो. Okay, so test tube लिनुभयो अनि त्यो test tube भित्र के छ, sodium carbonate solution. Okay, त्यहाँदेखि त्यो test tube लाई चाहिँ just एउटा thread, with the help of a thread, एउटा thread को सहायताले उहाँले झुन्डाउनु भयो. Okay, यसलाई झुन्डाइदिनु भयो. This is the cork. He closed the flask है. अनि त्यहाँदेखि यो चाहिँ test tube, त्यहाँदेखि test tube को भित्र के छ, sodium carbonate solution. Okay, यति सेटअप गर्नुभयो. So यति सेटअप गरेपछि के भयो, त्यहाँदेखि he weighed this thing, he weighed this apparatus and the weight came to be about x grams. Okay, so जब उहाँले यति सेटअप गर्नुभयो, कन्टेन्ट्सहरुलाई मिक्स गर्नु दिनु भएको छैन, जस्ट यसरी झुन्डाएर यो apparatusलाई के गर्नुभयो, त्यहाँ तौलिनु भयो. तौलिँदाखेरि x grams आयो. Now he allowed the contents of the flask and the test tube to mix with one another. So के गर्नुभयो, त्यहाँदेखि चाहिँ त्यो जुन चाहिँ फ्लास्क र टेस्ट ट्युब भित्र भएको कन्टेन्टलाई चाहिँ अब मिक्स हुनु दिनुभयो. ओके, सो he allowed the contents, both the contents to mix with one another. So यो थियो टेस्ट ट्युब. सो अब यसको टेस्ट ट्युबको कन्टेन्ट सबै यहाँ घोप्ट्यो अनि त्यहाँदेखि के भयो, यहाँ दुईटा रियाक्सन हुँदैछ. वाइ इज दिस कनिकल फ्लास्क सिल्ड भन्दा चाहिँ कर्कले किन बन्द गरेको भन्दा चाहिँ ग्यास फर्म भयो भने सो द ग्यास डज नट एस्केप आउट. ओके, त्यसको लागि चाहिँ उहाँले कर्क बन्द गर्नुभयो. सो हियर अ केमिकल रियाक्सन टुक प्लेस बिट्विन कपर सल्फेट सोल्युसन and sodium carbonate solution. So let me write down the reaction. यहाँनिर copper sulfate solution plus sodium carbonate solution. Okay, and there was a reaction and then copper carbonate and sodium sulfate was formed. Okay, so यस्तो पाराले reaction भयो. Reaction भएर यो कपर कार्बोनेट नयाँ चीज हो, सोडियम सल्फेट नयाँ चीज हो, किनभने यहाँ सोडियम सल्फेट कहीँ छैन नि है, कपर कार्बोनेट कहीँ छैन रिएक्टेन्ट्समा, प्रोडक्ट्समा चाहिँ नयाँ चीज बन्यो. नाउ दिस सेटल्स डाउन एट द बटम एन्ड यहाँ मुनि थुप्रिन्छ. सो इट फर्म्स द प्रेसिपिटेट. मुनि थुप्रियो भने त्यसलाई प्रेसिपिटेट भनिन्छ. अनि त्यहाँदेखि Now the color of the solution changes to pale green. Okay, first ma kasto थियो color? It was blue in color, light blue in color. Now the solution color of the solution you changed to pale green after the reaction took place. Okay, so yahanira ke bhayo? Now a chemical combination happened over here because new substances are formed. So यति chemical reaction भइसकेपछि he again weighed the contents of this flask. Okay, so again when he weighed the contents of the flask, it came to be exactly x grams. यसको weight जति थियो first मा reaction नहुँदा reaction भइसक्दा पनि weight त्यति नै आयो. So from this experiment he gave the first law of chemical combination, that is known as the law of conservation of mass. Okay, के भनिँदो रहेछ? First law of chemical combination लाई law of conservation of mass. Okay, so let us see what the law of conservation tells us. Okay, law of conservation of mass tells us. So the first law of chemical combination, laws of chemical combination मा first law चाहिँ छ, that is known as the law of conservation of mass. Okay. Now what does this law of conservation of mass say us? It states that it states that mass, okay, mass can neither be created nor destroyed in a chemical reaction. Okay, so chemical reaction ma चाहिँ matter can neither be mass can neither be created nor be destroyed. In other words यसलाई हामीले अर्को शब्दमा के लेख्न सक्छ भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ the mass of reactants is always equal to the mass of the products in a chemical reaction. So कुनै पनि chemical reaction मा mass बनिँदैन पनि mass हराउँदैन पनि भन्दैछ नि त हो. So त्यो कारणले गर्दा reactants को mass र product को mass is always equal. Okay, so this is the first law of conservation of mass. After establishing the first law, Anton Laurent Lavoisier, he realized that a compound is formed of the same elements irrespective of where the compound is coming from. Okay, so भन्नुको मतलब चाहिँ जहाँबाट आए पनि compound चाहिँ एउटा compound चाहिँ same elements ले बनिएको हुन्छ. Okay, a compound is made up of same elements irrespective of where the compound is coming from. भन्नुको मतलब चाहिँ let's take the example of water. In water, 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, they combine together. Okay, so water is always found to contain 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. That is why the formula is written water ko kasरी लेख्छ H2O लेख्छ नि त. This means there are 2 hydrogen atoms and O communicate छैन भनेको it is 1. Okay, so water is made up of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, and the ratio of hydrogen to oxygen is also definite भनेको fixed हुन्छ. जस्तो तपाईले पानी जहाँबाट पनि लिनुस् न, ट्याप वाटरबाट लिनुस्, पन्ड वाटरबाट लिनुस्, रिभरबाट, सीबाट, ओशनबाट, रेन वाटर जहाँबाट लिँदा पनि that water will always contain 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen, and atoms of hydrogen and oxygen are always in definite proportion. Okay, जस्तो वाटर को केसमा हेरौं भने mass of hydrogen, एउटा हाइड्रोजन को मास चाहिँ कति हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ 1 युनिट. ओके, 1 भनेर लिन्छ हामी हाइड्रोजन को. we'll study about this mass, about this u in the next sub topic. यही च्याप्टर मा हामी will study it later in this chapter. अहिले यति मात्रै याद राखिराख्नुस्, mass of one hydrogen atom is 1 unit. Similarly, the mass of one hydrogen, okay, mass of one oxygen atom is 16 units. Okay, so अब पानीमा कतिवटा छ mass of hydrogen ratio find out गरे नि, water को ratio find out गरे भने हाइड्रोजन दुईटा छ, एउटाको मास 1 हो भने दुईटाको मास 2. ओके, 2:2. oxygen को 1 को 16 हो, so एउटा मात्रै छ, so 2:16. ओके, so यसलाई सिम्प्लिफाई गर्दाखेरि the ratio will be 1:8. So in water, one part of hydrogen will always combine with 8 parts of oxygen by mass. Okay, so this is the definite ratio. Okay, let us do one numerical based on this. Okay, कोही बेला न्यूमेरिकल आउन सक्छ. So question यहाँ रहेछ, if we have 3 gram of hydrogen, how much oxygen will it require to form water? Okay, so यहाँ के भन्दैछ, अब हाइड्रोजन हाम्रोमा कति छ, 3 ग्राम छ. अब कति ग्राम अक्सिजन लाग्छ to form water भन्दैछ. So here we have to solve the question like this. Let the mass of oxygen be x. Okay, oxygen ko mass say x भयो. Okay, now we know that hydrogen and oxygen, they always combine in a fixed ratio in water by mass. ग्राम भनेको मास हो नि त, so त्यो रेशियो हामीले लेख्नु पर्यो, that is 1/8. 1 चाहिँ हाइड्रोजन को पार्ट हो, 8 चाहिँ अक्सिजन को पार्ट हो. Now it is equal to, यहाँ हाइड्रोजन को कति दिएको छ, weight 3. oxygen को we have to find out, we have taken it to be x, right? So x को value निकाल्दाखेरि 8 into 3 will be 24 grams. Okay, so how much oxygen will be required to form water? 3 gram hydrogen छ भने 24 gram oxygen लाग्छ to form water. Okay, now so यो यहाँबाट हामीले के बुझ्दैछ भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ every compound is made up of elements, and these elements always combine in a definite ratio. Okay, combining in a definite भनेको fixed proportion. Okay, so त्यस्तै गरी अर्को एउटा एक्जाम्पल हेरौं, by mass. अर्को एउटा एक्जाम्पल हेरौं, that is of ammonia. Okay, अमोनिया को फर्मुला चाहिँ NH3 सो NH3 मतलब यहाँ एउटा one nitrogen atom will combine with 3 hydrogen atoms ओके अब त्यसको रेशियो कस्तो हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि ammonia को ratio ammonia the formula is NH3 okay so here the mass of nitrogen first my nitrogen so we are taking the mass of nitrogen is 14 units okay and the mass of hydrogen is equals to अघि नै भनेको छ कति छ 1 so यहाँ तीनटा हाइड्रोजन छ means यहाँ कति छ 1 into 3 will be 3 units okay so ratio कति भयो त्यसो भने in ammonia by mass say 14:3 14:3 okay so this is the ratio by which in which nitrogen and hydrogen combine in ammonia so based on this I'll give you one question as homework okay everybody should do it and submit click the pictures submitted गरिसकेर त्यो पेज को पिक्चर क्लिक गरिकिन send it through WhatsApp okay question के रहेछ suppose if we have 28 gram of nitrogen how much of hydrogen excuse me I'm really sorry hydrogen will it require to form ammonia okay so this is your question for homework so now let us come back to the law of chemical combination so first law of chemical after establishing the first law of chemical combination Anton Laurent Lavoisier he said that the compounds are made up of elements and in compounds elements they combine together in a definite or fixed ratio okay so there was a scientist who was working along with Anton Laurent Lavoisier his name was Joseph Louis Proust okay and he was the person to give the second law of chemical combination that is the law of definite proportions okay the second law of chemical combination is known as law of definite proportion or law of constant proportion definite constant fixed भनेको चाहिँ हो okay कोही बुकमा constant proportion पनि भनेर दिएको हुन सक्छ okay now this was given by who are it was given by Joseph Louis Proust in the year 1797 now what does this law state okay it states that in a chemical substance मा चाहिँ के हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ elements are always present in definite proportions okay present in definite proportions by mass present in definite proportions by mass so कुनै पनि एउटा chemical substance मा चाहिँ elements हुन्छ element ले बनिएको हुन्छ र त्यो elements हरु चाहिँ they are always present in definite proportions by mass chemical substance or we can say chemical compound also okay now let us move on to the next subtopic that is Dalton's atomic theory अब यस्तो पाराले चाहिँ मान्छेहरुले चाहिँ अब साइन्टिस्टहरुले चाहिँ laws establish गर्नुभयो laws of chemical combination. Okay, now अब nature of matter को nature चाहिँ कस्तो हुन्छ के हुन्छ भनेर scientists they were always looking out for it. And there was one scientist, his name was John Dalton, and he gave the theory that is known as Dalton's atomic theory. Okay, Dalton's atomic theory. So it was given by a British chemist. He was a British chemist. His name was John Dalton in the year 1808. Okay, 1808 मा दिनु भएको. अनि त्यहाँदेखि his theory was based on the laws of chemical combination. So let us see what his theory says. अब उहाँको theory ले के भन्दै रहेछ? Postulates of Dalton's atomic theory. Okay, postulates भनेको assumptions without any proof, just assume मात्रै गरेको. No experimental work was done. Okay, so first postulate मा के छ? All forms of matter is made up of tiny particles called atoms. So उहाँले के भन्नुभयो? All forms of matter को जुनै पनि form, चाहे त्यो solid होस्, liquid होस्, gas होस्, whether it is an element or a compound or a mixture, everything, all forms of matter, it is made up of tiny particles, and those tiny particles are called atoms. Okay, second postulate, atoms are indivisible particles. यिनीहरूलाई चाहिँ हामी indivisible particles भनिन्छ. That cannot be created, divided or destroyed as a result of chemical change. So जम्मै matter atoms ले बनिएको हुन्छ, अनि यो atoms चाहिँ divide पनि हुँदैन, break हुँदैन, अनि त्यहाँदेखि it cannot be created or it cannot be destroyed in any chemical reaction. Okay, so third postulate मा third postulate ma atoms of the same element are identical in mass and chemical properties. So एउटा एलिमेन्ट को एटम्स हरु चाहिँ तिनीहरुको मास पनि बराबरै हुन्छ, प्रपर्टीज पनि सेम हुन्छ. जस्तो फर एक्जाम्पल gold is made up of gold atoms, and all the atoms of gold, they have same mass, same chemical properties. Okay, so fourth ma atoms of different elements have different mass and chemical properties. So different atoms, different elements को atoms भिन्दा भिन्दै हुन्छ, तिनीहरुको mass पनि भिन्दै हुन्छ, properties पनि भिन्दै हुन्छ. जस्तो gold र silver, these are two different elements. Okay, so gold is made up of gold atoms, silver is made up of silver atoms. दुईटै atoms ले बनिएको छ, तर गोल्डको एटम र सिल्भरको एटमको मासमा डिफरेन्स हुन्छ, त्यसको केमिकल प्रपर्टिजमा पनि डिफरेन्स हुन्छ. ओके, एन्ड फिफ्थ पोस्टुलेट इज atoms. Okay, atoms combine in the ratio of small whole numbers, to form compounds. So के गर्दैछ, atoms हरु चाहिँ they combine in small whole numbers to form compounds. अब water को example मा 1:8 को ratio मा combine गरेको थियो त, so whole numbers को ratio मा combine गरेर they form compounds. So these were the postulates, these were the assumptions of John Dalton. Okay, now Dalton's atomic theory was a failure. This was considered to be a failure because later on certain things were discovered, and due to which the points in Dalton's atomic theory was found to be contradictory. Okay, so failure ma kina chai fail bhayo. What are the drawbacks of Dalton's atomic theory? So let us discuss the drawbacks. Drawbacks of Dalton's atomic theory. Dalton's atomic theory was a failure. Because of following reasons. Okay, now why Dalton's atomic theory was considered to be a failure भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ first मा चाहिँ according to Dalton उहाँले first postulate मा के भन्नुभएको थियो, matter is made up of atoms. तर फेरि second postulate मा के भन्नुभयो, atoms are indivisible. But nowadays we know that atoms can be divided further into subatomic particles. According to Dalton, an atom is indivisible. उहाँले भन्नुभएको थियो atom indivisible हुन्छ भनेर, but atoms can be divided into subatomic particles. अझै पनि atoms लाई divide गरेर subatomic particles निक्लिन्छ त्यसबाट. There are 3 subatomic particles: electrons, protons and neutrons. Okay, so atoms लाई divide गर्यो भने चाहिँ त्यसबाट अब चाहिँ indivisible होइन atoms चाहिँ, they can be divided further into electrons, protons and neutrons. Okay, now let us move on to the second drawback of Dalton's atomic theory. उहाँले के भन्नुभएको थियो, Dalton said that atoms of same element have same properties and same masses. Okay, have same masses. But it was found out, later on it was found out that atoms of same elements have different masses. For example, chlorine को दुईटा mass हुन्छ. Some atoms of chlorine have 35 atomic mass and some have 37 atomic mass. हेर्नुस् त, so different भयो नि, chlorine नै हो सबै atoms, तर एउटाको 35 छ, कोहीको 35 छ, कोहीको 37. So same हुँदा पनि masses different भयो. These are known as isotopes. We'll study about this in the next chapter in detail. These are known as isotopes. Okay, so yahanira Dalton ko atomic theory fail bhayo. Ajai third ma Dalton ko atomic theory ko third ma drawback ke rahecha bhandakeri he said that atoms of different elements have different chemical properties. Tara later on it was found out that some atoms of different elements, though they are of different elements, but they have the same properties. Atoms of different elements have different chemical properties. Okay, different chemical properties was said by Dalton. But it was found out that atoms of some elements have same masses. Mass पनि एउटा property हो, chemical property हो. So same masses भयो नि त त्यो त भएन. जस्तो example, argon and calcium have same mass. कति हुन्छ 40. So हेर्नुस् त दुईटा argon भिन्दै हो, calcium भिन्दै हो, but they have the same mass. So these are known as isobars. You will study it in the next chapter. Okay, let's see isobar. So far what we studied is that atoms are made of, atoms make up matter. Atoms le banieko huncha. Therefore atoms are known as the building blocks of matter. Okay, element ma there are only one kind of atoms, but in compounds there are more than one kind of atoms. Okay, ani त्यहाँदेखि the smallest particle of an element is said to be an atom, whereas the smallest particle of a compound is said to be molecule. Okay, atom चाहिँ के को smallest particle अरे यो चाहिँ element को smallest particle हो. Molecule चाहिँ के को smallest particle हो, compound को smallest particle हो. We'll study in detail about this in the next class.